Page 802. Chapter 7. Select Incident of Lawful Trade. In Raymond there was a voice heard, weeping and lamentation, and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted. Miss Haley and Tom jogged onward to their wagon, each, for a time, absorbed in his own reflections. Now, the reflections of two men sitting side by side are a curious thing. Seated on the same seat, having the same eyes, ears, hands, and organs of all sorts, and have passed before their eyes the same objects. It is wonderful what a variety we shall find in these same reflections. As, for example, Mr. Haley. He thought first of Tom's length and breadth and height, and what he would sell for, if he was kept fat and in good case, till he got him into market. He thought of how he should make out his gain. He thought of the respective market value of certain superstitious men and women and children who were to compose it, and other kinder topics of the business. Then he thought of himself, and how humane he was, that whereas other men chained their niggers hand and foot both, he only put fetters on the feet, and left on the use of his hands, as long as he behaved well. And he sighed to think how ungrateful human nature was, so that there was even room to doubt whether Tom appreciated his mercies. He had been taken in so by niggers whom he had favored, but still he was astonished to consider how good-natured he yet remained. As to Tom, he was thinking over some words of an unfashionable old book, which kept running through his head again and again, as follows: "We have here no continuing city, but we seek one to come. Wherefore God himself is not ashamed to be called our God, for he hath prepared for us a city." These words of an ancient volume, got up principally by ignorant and unlearned words of an ancient volume, got up principally by ignorant and unlearned men, have through all the time kept up, somehow, a strange sort of power over the minds of poor, simple fellows like Tom. They stir up the soul from its depths, and rouse, as with trumpet call, courage, energy, and enthusiasm, where before was only the blackness of despair. Mr. Haley pulled out his pocket sundry newspapers, and began looking over their advertisements with absorbed interest. He was not a remarkably fluent reader, and was in the habit of reading in a sort of recitative half aloud, by way of calling it in his ears to verify the deductions of his eyes. In this tone, He slowly recited the following paragraph. Executor cells, niggers, negroes, agreeably to order of court, will be sold on Tuesday, February 20th, before the courthouse door, in the town of Washington, Kentucky. The following Negroes: Hager, age 60, John, age 30, Ben, aged 21, Saul, aged 25, Albert, aged 14, sold for the benefit of the creditors and heirs of the estate of Josiah Blutchford, Esq., Simon Morris, Thomas Flint, executors. This year I must look at, said he to Tom, to want of somebody else to talk to. You see, I'm going to get up a prime gang to take down with you, Tom. It'll make it sociable and pleasant like. Good company will, you know. We must drive right to Washington first and foremost, and then I'll clap you into jail while I does the business. Tom received this agreeable intelligence quite meekly, simply wondering, in his own heart, how many of these doomed men had wives and children, and whether they would feel as he did about leaving them. It is to be confessed, too, that the naive, offhand information that he was to thrown into jail by no means produced an agreeable impression on a poor fellow who had always prided himself on a strictly honest and upright course of life. Yes, Tom, we must confess it, was rather proud of his honesty, poor fellow, not having very much else to be proud of. If he had belonged to some of the higher walks of society, he, perhaps, would never have been reduced to such straits. However, the day wore on, and the evening saw Hallie and Tom comfortably accommodated in Washington, the one in a tavern and the other in a jail. About 11 o'clock the next day, a mixed throng was gathered around the courthouse steps, smoking, chewing, spitting, swearing, and conversing, according to their respective tastes and turns, waiting for the auction to commence. The men and women to be sold sat in a group apart, talking in a low tone to each other. The woman who had been advertised by the name of Hager was a regular African in feature and figure. She might have been 60, but was older than that by hard work and disease, was partially blind, and somewhat crippled with rheumatism. By her side stood her only remaining son, Albert, a bright-looking little fellow of 14 years. The boy was the only survivor of a large family, who had been successively sold away from her to Thousand Market. The mother held on to him with both her shaking hands, and eyed with intense trepidation everyone who walked up to examine him. "Don't be feared, Aunt Hagar," said the oldest of the men. "I spoke to Master Thomas about it, and he thought he might manage to sell you in a lot both together." "They needn't call me worn out yet," said she, lifting her shaking hands. "I can cook yet, to scrape and score. I'm watch a buying. If I do come cheap, tell them, daughter." "You tell them," she added, earnestly. Hallie here forced his way into the group, walked up to the old man, poured his mouth open and looked in, felt of his teeth, made him stand and strengthen himself, bent his back, and performed various evaluations to show his muscles, and then passed on to the next, and put him through the same trial. Walking up last to the boy, he felt of his arms, straightened his hands, and looked at his fingers, and made him jump, to show his agility. "He ain't going to thought without me," said the old woman, with passionate eagerness. "He and I goes in a lot together. He's real strong yet, master, and can do halves of work. Halves on it, master." "On plantation?" said Hallie, with a contemptuous glance. "Likely story." And, as if satisfied with his examination, he walked out and looked, and stood with his hands in his pocket, his cigar in his mouth, and his hat cocked on one side, ready for action. "What think of them?" said a man who had been following Hallie's examination, as if to make up to his own mind from it. "Well," said Hallie, spitting, "I shall put in, I think, for the youngerly ones and the boy." "They want to sell the boy and the woman together," said the man. "Find it a typo. Why, he's an old rack of bones, not worth her salt." "You wouldn't then," said the man. Anybody be a food would. She is half blind, crooked with rheumatis, and foolish to boot. Some buys of these here old critters, and sees there's a sight more wear in them than a body think," said the man, reflectively. No go at all," said Hallie. "Wouldn't take her for a present fact, I sing now. Well, he's kind of pity, now, not to buy her with her son. Her heart seems so sot on him. Suppose they fling her in cheap. Then that's got money to spend that or way. It's all well enough. I shall bid off on that or boy for a plantation hand. Wouldn't be bothered with her, no way. Not if they've give her to me," said Hallie. "She'll took on this bit," said the man. "Naturally, she will," said the trader, coolly. The conversation was here interrupted by a busy hum in the audience, and the auctioneer, a short, bustling, important fellow, elbowed his way into the crowd. The old woman drew in her breath and caught it instinctively at her son. "Keep close to your mummy, Albert, close. They'll put us up together," she said. "Oh, mummy, I'm feared they won't," said the boy. "They must, child. I can't leave, no ways, if they don't," said the old creature vehemently. The stentorian tones of the auctioneer, calling out to clear the way, now announced that the sale was about to commence. The place was cleared, and the bidding begun. The different men on the list were soon knocked off at prices which showed a pretty brisk demand in the market. Two of them fell to Hallie. "Come, Hal, come now, young'un," said the auctioneer, giving the boy a touch with his hammer. "Be up and show your springs now. Put us two up together. Together, do please, master," said the old woman, holding fast to her boy. "Be off," said the man, goofy, pushing her hands away. "You come last. Now, darky, spring." And with the word, he pushed the boy towards the block, while a deep, heavy groan rose behind him. The boy paused and looked back, but there was no time to stay, and, dashing the tears from his large, bright eyes, he was up in a moment. His fine figure, alert limbs, a bright face, raised in an instant competition. Half a dozen bits simultaneously met the ear of the auctioneer. Anxious, self-frightened, he looked from side to side as he heard the clatter of contending bits, now here, now there, till the hammer fell. Hallie had got him. He was pushed from the block toward his new master, but stopped one moment, and looked back, when his poor old mother, trembling in every limb, held out her shaky hands toward him. "Buy me too, master, for the dear Lord's sake. Buy me. I should die if you don't." "You should die if I do. That's the kink of it," said Hallie. "No," and he turned on his heel. The bidding for the poor old creature was summary. The man who had addressed Hallie, and who seemed not destitute of compassion, bought her for a trifle, and the spectators began to disperse. The poor victims of the sales, who had been brought up in one place together for years, gathered round the despairing old mother, whose agony was pitiful to see. "Couldn't they give me one? Master Lurs said I should have one. He did," he repeated over and over, in heartbroken tones. Trust in the Lord, Aunt Hagar, said the oldest of the men, sorrowfully. What good will it do? Said she, sobbing passionately. Mother, mother, don't, said the boy. They say you've got a great master. I don't care. Oh, Albert, oh, my boy, use my blessed baby. Lord, how can I? Come, take her off. Can some of ye? Said Hallie, dryly. Don't do no good for her to go on that our way. The old man of the company, partly by persuasion and partly by force, loosed the poor creature's last despairing hold, and, as they led her off to her new master's wagon, strove to comfort her. Now, said Hallie, pushing his three purchases together and producing a bundle of handcuffs, which he proceeded to put on their wrists, and fastening each handcuff to a long chain, he drove them before him to the jail. A few days saw Hallie, with his possessions, safely deposited on one of the Ohio boats. It was the commencement of his game to be augmented as the boat moved on, by various other merchandise of the same kind, which he, or his agent, had stored for him in various points along shore. The Belle River, as brave and beautiful a boat as ever walked the waters of her namesake river, was floating gaily down the stream, under a brilliant sky, the stripes and stars of free America waving and spluttering overhead. The guards crowded with well-dressed ladies and gentlemen walking and enjoying the delightful day. All was full of life, buoyant and rejoicing. All but Hallie's gang, who were stored, with other freight, on the lower deck, and who, somehow, did not seem to appreciate their various privileges, as they sat in a knot, talking to each other in low tones. Boys, said Hallie, coming up briskly, I hope you keep up good heart and are cheerful. Now, no sucks, you see. Keep stiff upper lip. Boys, do well by me, and I'll do well by you. The boys addressed responded the invariable, Yes, master, for ages the watchword of poor Africa. But it's to be owned they did not look particularly cheerful. They had their various little prejudices in favor of wives, mothers, sisters, and children, seen for the last time, and though they that vested them required of them mirth, it was not intently forthcoming. I've got a wife, spoke out the article enumerated as John aged 30. He laid his chained hand on Tom's knee. And she don't know a word about this, poor girl. Where does she live? said Tom. Page 806. In a tavern a piece down there, said John. I wish now I could see her once more in this world, he added. Poor John! It was rather natural, and the tears that fell as he spoke came as naturally as if he had been a white man. Tom drew a long breath from a sore heart, and tried, in his poor way, to comfort him. And overhead, in the cabin, sat fathers and mothers, husbands and wives, and merry, dancing children moved round among them, like so many little butterflies, and everything was going on quite easy and comfortable. "Oh, mamma," said a boy, who had just come up from below, "there's a negro trader on board, and he's brought 4 or 5 slaves down there." "Poor creatures!" said the mother, in a tone between grief and indignation. "What's that?" said another lady. "Some poor slaves below," said the mother. "And they've got chains on," said the boy. "What a shame to our country that such sights are to be seen," said another lady. "Oh, there is a great deal to be said on both sides of the subject," said a gentlewoman, who sat at her stateroom door sewing, while her little girl and boy were playing round her. "I've been South, and I must say, I think the negroes are better off than they would be to be free. In some respects, some of them are well off, I grant," said the lady to whose remark she had answered. "The most dreadful part of slavery, to my mind, is its outrages on the feelings and affections. The separating of families, for example." "That is a bad thing, certainly," said the other lady, holding up a baby's dress she had just completed, and looking intently on its trimmings. "But then, I fancy, it don't occur often." "Oh, it does," said the first lady eagerly. "I've lived many years in Kentucky, Kentucky, and Virginia, both, and I've seen enough to make other one's heart sick. Suppose, ma'am, your 2 children there should be taken from you and sold?" "We can't reason from our feelings to those of this class of persons," said the other lady, sorting out some worsteds on her lap. "Indeed, ma'am, you can know nothing of them, if you say so," answered the first lady, warmly. "I was born and brought up among them. I know they do feel, just as keenly, even more so, perhaps, as we do." The lady said "Indeed," yawned, and looked out the cabin window, and finally repeated, for a finale, the remark with which she had begun. "After all, I think they are better off than they would be to be free. It's undoubtedly the intention of Providence that the African race should be servants, kept in a low condition," said a grave-looking gentleman in black, a clergyman, seated by the cabin door. "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be, the Scripture says." "I say, strangers, is that what the text means?" said a tall man, standing by. "Undoubtedly, it pleased Providence, for some inscrutable reason, to doom the race to bondage ages ago, and we must not set up our opinion against that." "Well then, "Well, all go ahead and buy up niggers," said the man. "If that's the way of Providence, won't we, Squire?" said he, turned to Haley, who had been standing, with his hands in his pockets, by the stove, and intently listening to the conversation. "Yes," continued the tall man, "we must all be resigned to the decrees of Providence. Niggers must be sold, and trucked round, and kept under. It's what they's made for. 'Pears like this yer view's quite refreshing, ain't it, stranger?" said he to Haley. "I never thought on it," said Haley. "I couldn't have said as much myself. I hain't no larning. I took up the trade just to make a living. If I'm right, I calculated to spend on it in time, you know. And now you'll save yourself the trouble, won't you?" said the tall man. "See what it is, now, to know Scripture. If you'd only studied your Bible like this, you good man, you might have knowed it before, and saved you a heap of trouble. You could just have said, 'Cusby, what's his name?' and won't all have gone right." And the stranger, who was no longer than the honest drover whom we introduced to our readers in the Kentucky tavern, sat down and began smoking, with a curious smile on his long, dry face. A tall, slender young man, with a face expressive of great feeling and intelligence, here broke in, and repeated the words, "All things whatsoever ye would that man should do unto you, do ye even so unto them. I suppose," he added, "that is Scripture, as much as cursed be canon." "Well, it seems quite as plain a text, stranger," said John the drover, "to poor fellows like us now." And John smoked on like a volcano. The young man paused, looked as if he was going to say more, when suddenly the boat stopped, and the company made the usual steamboat rush, to see where they were landing. "Both and our chaps parsons?" said John to one of the men, as they were going out. The man nodded. As the boat stopped, a black woman came running wildly up the plank, darted into the crowd, flew up to where the slave gang sat, and threw her arms round that unfortunate piece of merchandise before enumerated, John 8:30, and with sobs and tears bemoaned him as her husband. But what needs tell the story, told too oft, every day told, of heartstrings rent and broken, the weak broken and torn for the profit and convenience of the strong? It needs not to be told. Every day is telling it too, in the ear of one who is not deaf, though he be long silent. The young man who had spoken for the cause of humanity and God before stood with folded arms, looking on his this scene. He turned, and Hallie was standing at his side. "My friend," he said, speaking with thick utterance, "how can you, how dare you, carry on a trick like this? Look at those poor creatures. Here I am, rejoicing in my heart that I'm going home to my wife and child, and the same bell, which is a signal to carry me onward towards them, will part this poor man and his wife forever. Depend upon it, God will bring you into judgment for this." The trader turned away in silence. "I say it now," said the drover, touching his elbow. "There's differences in parsons, aren't there? Cousin Bay Cannon don't seem to go down with his son, does it?" Hallie gave an uneasy growl. "And that aren't the worst on it," said John. "Maybe it won't go down with the Lord, neither, when you come to settle with him one of these days, as all on us must, I reckon." Hallie walked reflectively to the other end of the boat. "If I make pretty handsomely on one or two next games," he thought, "I reckon I'll stop up this year. It's really getting dangerous." And he took out his pocket-book and began adding over his account, a process which many gentlemen besides Mr. Hallie have found a specific for an uneasy conscience. The boat swept proudly away from the shore, and all went on merrily, as before. Men talked, and laughed, and read, and smoked. Women sewed, and children played, and the boat passed on her way. One day, when she lay to for a while at a small town in Kentucky, Hallie went up into the place on a little matter of business. Tom, whose flatters did not prevent his taking a moderate circuit, had drawn near the side of the boat, and stood listlessly gazing over the railings. After a time, he saw the trader returning, with an alert step, in company with a colored woman, bearing in her arms a young child. She was dressed quite respectably, and a colored man followed her, bringing along a small trunk. The woman came cheerfully onward, talking, as she came, with the man who bore her trunk, and so passed up the plank into the boat. The bell rung, and steamer whizzed. The engine groaned and coughed, and away swept the boat down the river. The woman walked forward among the boxes and bales of the lower deck, and sitting on, busied herself with chirruping to her baby. Hallie made a turn or two about the boat, and then, coming up, seated himself near her, and began saying something to her in an indifferent undertone. Tom soon noticed a heavy cloud passing over the woman's brow, and that she answered rapidly and with great vehemence. "I don't believe it! I won't believe it!" He heard her say. "You are just fooling with me." "If you won't believe it, look here," said the man, drawing out a paper. "This here's the bill of sale, and there's your master's name on to it, and I paid down good solid cash for it too, I can tell you. So now—" "I don't believe master would cheat me so. It can't be true," said the woman, with increasing agitation. "You can ask any of these men here that can read writing. Here," he said to a man that was passing by, "just read this here, won't you? This here gal won't believe me when I tell her what's it. Why, it's a bill of sale, signed by John Fosdick," said the man, making over to you the girl Lucy and her child. "It's all straight enough, for aught I see." The woman's passionate exclamations collected a crowd around her, and the trader briefly explained to them the cause of the agitation. "He told me that I was going down to Louisville to hire out as cook to the same tavern where my husband works. That's what master told me, his own self, and I can't believe he'd lie to me," said the woman. "But he has sold you, my poor woman, there's no doubt about it," said a good-natured looking man, who had been examining the papers. "He has done it, and no mistake." "Then it's no account talking," said the woman, suddenly growing quite calm, and clapping her child tighter in her arms. She sat down on her box, turned her back round, and gazed listlessly into the river. "Going to take it easy, after all," said the trader. "Gal's got tricked, I see." The woman looked calm as the boat went on, and a beautiful soft summer breeze passed like a compassionate spirit over her head. The gentle breeze that never inquires whether the brow is dusky or fair, that it fans. And she saw sunshine sparkling on the water, the golden ripples, and heard gay voices, full of ease and pleasure, talking around her everywhere. But her heart lay as if a great stone had fallen on it. Her baby raised himself up against her, and stroked her cheeks with his little hands, and springing up and down, crowing and chatting, seemed determined to arouse her. She strained him suddenly and tightly in her arms, and slowly one tear after another fell on his wondering, unconscious face, and gradually she seemed, and little by little, to grow calmer, and busied herself with tending and nursing him. The child, a boy of 10 months, was uncommonly large and strong of his age, and very vigorous in his limbs. Never for a moment still. He kept her mother constantly busy in holding him, and guarding his springing activity. "That's a fine chap," said a man, suddenly stopping opposite to him, with his hands in his pockets. "How old is he?" 10 months and a half," said the mother. The man whistled to the baby, and offered him part of a stick of candy, which he eagerly grabbed at, and very soon had it in a baby's general depository to wit, his mouth. "Rum fellow," said the man, "knows what's what." And he whistled, and walked down. When he had got to the other side of the boat, he came across Hallie, who was smoking on top of a pile of boxes. The stranger introduced a match, and lighted a cigar, saying, as he did so, "Decentish kind of wench you've got round there, stranger." "Why, I reckon she's tolerable fair," said Hallie, blowing the smoke out of his mouth. "Taking her down south?" said the man. Hallie nodded, and smoked on. "Plantation hand?" said the man. "Well," said Hallie, "I'm filling out an order for a plantation, and I think I shall put her in. They tell me she was a good cook, and they can use her for that, and set her at the cotton picking. She's got the right fingers for that. I look at 'em. So well, either way." And Hallie resumed his cigar. "They won't want the young one on the plantation," said the man. "I shall sell him, first chance I found," said Hallie, lighting another cigar. "Suppose you'd selling him tolerable cheap," said the stranger, mounting the pile of boxes, and sitting down comfortably. Don't know about it," said Hallie. "He's a pretty smart young un. Straight, fat, strong, flesh as hard as a brick." "Very true, but then there's all the bother and expense of raising." "Nonsense," said Hallie. "They is raised as easy any kind of creetur there is going. They aren't a bit more trouble than pups. This yer chap will be running all round in a month. I've got a good place to raise in, and I thought of taking in a little more stock," said the man. "One cook lost a young un last week. Got drownded in a wash tub, while she was hanging out clothes, and I reckon it would be well enough to set her to raising this year." Hallie and the stranger smoked a while in silence, neither seeming willing to broach the test question of the interview. At last the man resumed. "You wouldn't think of wanting more than $10 for that ar chap, seeing you must get him off yer hand, anyhow?" Hallie shook his head, and spit impressively. "That won't do, no ways," he said, and began his smoking again. "Well, stranger, what will you take?" "Well now," said Hallie, "I could raise that our chap myself, or get him raised. He's uncommon likely and healthy, and he'd fetch $100 6 months hence, and in a year or two he'd bring 200, if I had him in the right spot. So I shan't take a cent less nor 50 for him now." "Oh, stranger, that's ridiculous altogether," said the man. "Fact," said Hallie, with a divisive nod of his head. "I'll give 30 for him," said the stranger, "but not a cent more." "Now, I'll tell ye what I will do," said Hallie, spitting again, with renewed decision. "I will split the difference, and say 45, and that's the most I will do." "Well, agreed," said the man, after an interval. "Done," said Hallie. "Where do you land?" "At Louisville," said the man. "Louisville," said Hallie. "Very fair. We get there about dusk. Chap will be asleep. All fair. Get him off quickly, and no screaming. Happens beautiful. I like to do everything quickly. I hate all kind of agitation and fluster." And so, after a transfer of certain bills had passed from the man's pocket book to the trader's, he resumed his cigar. It was a bright, tranquil evening when the boat stopped at a wharf at Louisville, and woman had been sitting with her baby in her arms. Now she hastily laid the child down in a little cradle formed by the hollow among the boxes, first carefully spreading under it her cloak, and then she sprung to the side of the boat, in hopes that, among the various hotel waiters who thronged the wharf, she might see her husband. In this hope, she pressed forward to the front rails, and stretching far over them, strained her eyes intently on the moving heads on the shore. And the crowd pressed in between her and the child. "Now's your time," said Hallie, taking the sleeping child up and handing him to the stranger. Don't wake him up, and send him to crying. Now, it would make a devil of fuss with the gal." The man took the bundle carefully, and was soon lost in the crowd that went up the wharf. When the boat, creaking and groaning and puffing, had loosed from the wharf, and was beginning slowly to strain herself along, the woman returned to her old seat. The trader was sitting there. The child was gone. "Why? Why? Where?" she began, in bewildered surprise. "Lucy," said the trader, your child's gone. You may as well know it first as last. You see, I knowed you couldn't take him down south, and I got a chance to sell him to a first-rate family. They'll raise him better than you can." The trader had arrived at the stage of Christian and political perfection which has been recommended by some preachers and politicians of the North lately, in which he had completely overcome every human weakness and prejudice. His heart was exactly where yours, sir, and mine could be bright, with proper effort and cultivation. The wild look of an anguish and utter despair that the woman cast on him might have disturbed one less practice. But he was used to it. He had seen that same look hundreds of times. You can get used to such things too, my friend, and it is a great subject to recent efforts to make our whole Northern community used to them, for the glory of the Union. So the trader only regarded the mortal anguish which he saw working in those dark features, those clenched hands, and suffocating breathings, as necessary incidents of the trade, and merely calculated whether she was going on to scream and get up a commotion on the boat, for, like other supporters of our particular institution, he decidedly disliked agitation. But the woman did not scream. The shot had passed too straight and direct through the heart, for cry or tear. Dazedly she sat down. Her slack hands fell lightly by her side. Her eyes looked straight forward, but she saw nothing. All the noise and hum of the boat, the groaning of the missionary, mingled dreamily to her bewildered ear, and the poor, dumb, stricken heart had neither cry nor tear to show for its utter misery. She was quite calm. The trader, who, considering his advantages, was almost as humane as some of our politicians, seemed to feel called on to administer such consolation as the case admitted of. "I know this year comes kinder hard at first, Lucy," said he, "but such a smart, sensible gal as you are won't give way to it. You see it's necessary, and it can't be helped." "Oh, don't, master, don't," said the woman, with a voice like one that is smothering. "You are a smart wench, Lucy," he persisted. "I mean to do well by ye, and get ye a nice place down river, and you'll soon get another husband, such a likely gal as you." "Oh, master, if you only won't talk to me now," said the woman, in a voice of such quick and living anguish that the trader felt that there was something at present in the case beyond his style of operation. He got up, and the woman turned away and buried her head in her cloak. The trader walked up and down for a time, and occasionally stopped and looked at her. Takes it hard, rather," he soliloquized, "but quiet though. Let her sweat a while. she'll come right by and by." Tom had watched the whole transaction from first to last, and had a perfect understanding of its results. To him, it looked like something unutterably horrible and cruel, because, poor, ignorant black soul, he had not learned to generalize, and to take enlarged views. If he had only been instructed by certain ministers of Christianity, he might have thought better of it, and seen and seen it and seen and seen in it an everyday incident of lawful trade, a trade which is the vital support of an institution which some American divines tell us has no evils but such as are inseparable from any other relations in social and domestic life. But Tom, as we see, being a poor, ignorant fellow, whose reading had been confined entirely to the New Testament, could not comfort and solace himself with views like this. His very soul bled within him for what seemed to him the wrongs of the poor suffering thing that lay like a crushed reed on the boxes. The feeling, living, bleeding, yet immortal thing, which American state so cruelly classes with the bundles and bales and boxes, among which she is lying. Tom drew near and tried to say something, but she only groaned, honestly, and with tears running down his own cheeks. He spoke of a heart of love in the skies, of a pitying Jesus, and an eternal home, and the ear was deaf with anguish, and the palest heart could be filled. Night came on, night came on, night come, unmoved and glorious, shining down with her innumerable and solemn and angel eyes, twinkling, beautiful, but silent. There was no speech nor language, no pitying voice nor helping hand, from that distant sky. One after another, the voices of business or pleasure died away. All on the boat were sleeping, and the ripples at the prow were plainly heard. Tom stretched himself out on a box, and there, as he lay, he heard, ever and anon, a smothered sob or cry from the prostrate creature. "Oh, what shall I do? Oh, Lord! Oh, good Lord! Do help me!" And so, ever and anon, until the murmur died away in silence. At midnight, Tom waked, with a sudden start. Something black passed quickly by him to the side of the boat, and he heard a splash in the water. No one else saw or heard anything. He raised his head. The woman's place was vacant. He got up and sought about him in vain. The poor bleeding heart was still, at last, and the river rippled and dimpled just as brightly as if it had not closed above it. Patience, patience! Yet whose hearts swell indignant at wrongs like these? Not one throb of anguish, not one tear of the oppressed, is forgotten by the man of sorrows, the Lord of glory. In his patient, generous bosom he bears the anguish of a world. Bear thou, like him, in patience, and labor in love. For sure as he is God, the year of his redeemed shall come. The traitor woke up, the traitor waked up bright and early, and came out to see to his livestock. It was now his turn to look about in perplexity. "Where alive is that gal?" he said to Tom. Tom, who had learned the wisdom of keeping counsel, did not feel called on to state his observations and suspicions, but said he did not know. She surely couldn't have got up in the night at any of the landings, for I was awake and on the lookout. Whenever the boat stopped, I never trust these things to other folks." This speech was addressed to Tom quite confidentially, as if it was something that would be specially interesting to him. Tom made no answer. The trader searched the boat from stem to stern, among boxes, bales, and barrels, around the missionary, by the chimneys, in vain. "Now, I say, Tom, be fair about this yet," he said, when, after a fruitless search, he came where Tom was standing. "You know something about it, now. Don't tell me. I know you do. I saw the gal stretched out here about 10 o'clock, and again in 12, and again between 1 and 2, and then at 4 she was gone. And you was sleeping right there all the time. Now you know something. You can't help it." "Well, master," said Tom, "towards morning something brushed by me, and I kinder half woke. And then I heard a great splash, and then I clear woke up, and the gal was gone. That's all I know on it." The trader was not shocked nor amazed, because, as we said before, he was used to a great many things that you are not used to. Even the awful presence of death struck no solemn chill upon him. He had seen death many times, met him in the way of trade, and got acquainted with him early, and he only thought of him as a hard customer. That embarrassed his property operations very unfairly, and so he only swore that the gal was a baggage, and that he was devilish unlucky, and that if things went on in this way, he should not make a cent on the trip. In short, he seemed to consider himself a ill-used man, decidedly. But there was no help for it, as the woman had escaped into a state which never will give up a fugitive, not even at the demand of the whole glorious Union. The trader, therefore, sat discontentedly down, with his little account book, and put down the missing body and soul under the head of Lucy's. He's a shocking creature, isn't it? Isn't he, this trader? So unfeeling. It's dreadful, really. Oh, but nobody thinks anything of these traders. They are universally despised, never received into any decent society. But who, sir, makes the trader? Who is most to blame? The enlightened, cultivated, intelligent man, who supports this system of which the trader is the inevitable result, or the poor trader himself. You make the public sentiment that calls for his trade, that debauches and depraves him, till he feels no shame in it. And in what are you better than he? Are you educated and he ignorant? You high and he low? You refined and he coarse? You talented and he simple? In the day of a future judgment, these very considerations may make it more tolerable for him than for you. In concluding this little instance of lawful trade, we must beg the world not to think that American legislators are entirely destitute of humanity, as might, perhaps, be unfairly inferred from the great efforts made in our national body to protect and perpetuate this species of traffic. Who does not know how our great men are outdoing themselves in declaiming against the foreign slave trade? There are a perfect host of Clarksons and Wilberforces risen up among us on that subject, most edifying to hear and behold. Trading Negroes from Africa, dear reader, it is so horrid. It is not to be thought of. But trading them from Kentucky, it's quite another thing. Volume 2, from chapter 26, Death. Weep not for those whom the veil of the tomb, in life's early morning, has hid from our eyes. Mamma, said Eva, I want to have some of my hair cut off. A great deal of it. What for? Said Mary. Mamma, I want to give some away to my friends, while I am able to give it to them myself. Won't you ask Auntie to come and cut it for me? Mary raised her voice and called Miss Ophelia from the other room. The child half rose from her pillow as she came in, and shaking down her long golden brown curls, said, rather playfully, Come, Auntie, shear the sheep. What's that? Said St. Clair, who just then entered with some fruit he had been out to get for her. Papa, I just want Auntie to cut off some of my hair. There's too much of it, and it makes my head hot. Besides, I want to give some of it away. Miss Ophelia came, with her scissors. "Take care, don't spoil the looks of it," said her father. "Cut underneath, where it won't show. Eva's curls are my pride." "Oh, papa," said Eva, sadly. "Yes, and I want them kept handsome against the time I take you up to your uncle's plantation, to see cousin Henrik," said St. Clair, in a gay tone. "I shall never go there, papa. I'm going to a better country. Oh, do believe me. Don't you see, papa, that I get weaker every day?" "Why do you insist that I should believe such a cruel thing, Eva?" said her father. "Only because it is true, papa. And if you will believe it now, perhaps you will get to feel about it as I do." St. Clair closed his lips, and stood gloomily eyeing the long, beautiful curls, which, as they were separated from the child's head, were laid, one by one, in her lap. She raised them up, looked earnestly at them, twined them around her thin fingers, and looked, from time to time, anxiously at her father. "It's just what I've been foreboding for Mary," said Mary. "It's just what has been preying on my health from day to day, bringing me downward to the grave, though nobody regards it. I have seen it long. St. Clair, you will see after a while that I was right." "Which will afford you great consolation, no doubt," said St. Clair, in a dry, bitter tone. Mary lay back on a log, and covered her face with her cambric handkerchief. Eva's clear blue eye looked earnestly from one to the other. It was the calm, comprehending gaze of a soul half loosed from its earthly bonds. It was evident she saw, felt, and appreciated the difference between the two. She beckoned with her hand to her father. He came and sat down by her. "Papa, my strength fades away every day, and I know I must go. There are some things I want to say and do, that I ought to do, and you are so unwilling to have me speak a word on this subject. But it must come. There is no putting it off. Do be willing I should speak now." "My child, I'm willing," said St. Clair, covering his eyes with one hand, and holding up Eva's hand with the other. "Then I want to see all our people together. I have some things I must say to them," said Eva. "Well," said St. Clair, in a tone of dry endurance. Miss Ophelia dispatched a messenger, and soon the whole of the servants were convened in the room. Eva lay back on her pillows, her hair hanging loosely about her face, her crimson cheeks contrasting painfully with the intense whiteness of her complexion and the thin contour of her limbs and features, and her large, soul-like eyes fixed earnestly on everyone. The servants were struck with a sudden emotion. The spiritual face, the long locks of hair cut off and lying by her, her father's alert, averts, 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 averted face, and Mary's sobs struck at once upon the feelings of a sensitive and impressible race, and as they came in, they looked one on another, sighed, and shook their heads. There was a deep silence, like that of a funeral. Eva raised herself and looked long and earnestly round at everyone. All looked sad and apprehensive. Many of the women hid their faces in their aprons. "I sent for you all, my dear friends," said Eva, "because I love you. I love you all, and I have something to say to you, which I want you always to remember. I'm going to leave you. In a few more weeks, you will see me no more." Here the child was interrupted by a burst of groans, sobs, and lamentations, which broke from all present, and in which her slender voice was lost entirely. She waited a moment, and then, speaking in a tone that checked the sobs of all, she said, "If you love me, you must not interrupt me so. Listen to what I say. I want to speak to you about your souls. Many of you, I'm afraid, are very careless. You are thinking only about this world. I want you to remember that there is a beautiful world where Jesus is. I'm going there, and you can go there. It is for you as much as me. But if you want to go there, you must not live idle, careless, thoughtless lives. You must be Christians. You must remember that each one of you can become angels, and be angels forever. If you want to be Christians, Jesus will help you. You must pray to him. You must read." The child checked herself, looked piteously at them, and said sorrowfully, "Oh dear, you can't read, poor souls." And she hid her face in the pillow and sobbed, while many a smothered sob from those she was addressing, who were kneeling on the floor, aroused her. "Never mind," she said, raising her face and smiling brightly through her tears. "I have prayed for you, and I know Jesus will help you, even if you can't read. Try all to do the best you can. Pray every day, ask him to help you, and get the Bible read to you whenever you can. And I think I shall see you all in heaven." "Amen," was the murmured response from the lips of Tom and Mummy, and some of the elder ones who belonged to the Methodist Church. The younger and more thoughtless ones, for the time completely overcome, were sobbing, with their heads bowed upon their knees. "I know," said Lisa, "you all love me." "Yes, oh yes, indeed we do. Lord bless her," was the involuntary answer of all. "Yes, I know you do. There isn't one of you that hasn't always been very kind to me, and I want to give you something that, when you look at, you should always remember me. I'm going to give you all of you a curl of my hair, and, when you look at it, think that I love you and am gone to heaven, and that I want to see you all there. It's impossible to describe this scene, as, with tears and sobs, they gathered round the little creature, and took from their hands what seemed to them a last mark of her love. They fell on their knees, they sobbed, and prayed, and kissed the hem of her garment. And the elder ones poured forth words of endearment, mingled in prayers and blessings, after the manner of their respectable race. As each one took their gift, Miss Ophelia, who was apprehensive for the effect of all this excitement on her little patient, signed to each one to pass out of the apartment. At last, all were gone but Tom and Mummy. "Here, Uncle Tom," said Eva. "It's a beautiful one for you." "Oh, I'm so happy, Uncle Tom, to think I shall see you in heaven, for I'm sure I shall. And Mummy, dear, good, kind Mummy," she said, fondly throwing her arms round her old nurse. I know you'll be there too." "Oh, Miss Eva, don't see how I can live without you, nohow," said the faithful creature. "'Pears like it's just taking everything off the place to unsit." And Mummy gave way to a passion of grief. Miss Ophelia pushed her and Tom gently from the apartment, and thought they were all gone. But, as she returned, Topsy was standing there. "Where did you start up from?" she said suddenly. "I was there," said Topsy, wiping the tears from her eyes. "Oh, Miss Eva, I've been a bad girl, but won't you give me one too?" "Yes, poor Topsy, to be sure, I will. There, every time you look at that, think that I love you, and wanted you to be a good girl." "Oh, Miss Eva, I is trying," said Topsy earnestly. "But Lord, it's so hard to be good. 'Pears like I aren't used to it, no ways." Jesus knows it, Topsy. He is sorry for you. He will help you." Topsy, with her eyes hid in her apron, was silently passed from the apartment by Miss Ophelia. But, as she went, she hid the precious curl in her bosom. Eva had been unusually bright and cheerful that afternoon, and had sat raised in her bed, and looked over all her little trinkets and precious things, and designated the friends to whom she would have them given. and her manner was more animated, and her voice more natural than they had known it for weeks. Her father had been in the evening, and had said that Eva appeared more like her former self than ever she had done since her sickness. And when he kissed her for the night, he said to Miss Ophelia, "Cousin, we may keep her with us, after all. She is certainly better." And he had retired with a lighter heart in his bosom than he had had there for weeks. But at midnight, strange, mystic hour, when the veil between the frail present and the eternal future grows thin, then came the messenger. There was a sound in that chamber, first of one who stepped quickly. It was Miss Ophelia, who had resolved to sit up all night with her little charge, and who, at the turn of the night, had discerned what experienced nurses significantly call a change. The outer door was quickly opened, and Tom, who was watched outside, was on the alert in a moment. "Go for the doctor, Tom. Lose not a moment," said Miss Ophelia, and, stepping across the room, she rapped at St. Clair's door. "Cousin," she said, "I wish you would come." Those words fell on his heart like coals upon a coffin. Why did they? He was up and in the room in an instant, and bending over Eva, who still slept. What was it he saw that made his heart stand still? Why was no word spoken between the two? Thou canst say, who hast seen that same expression on the face dearest to thee, that look indescribable, helpless, unmistakable, that says to thee that thy beloved is no longer thine. On the face of the child, however, there was no ghostly imprint, only a high and almost sublime expression. The overshadowing presence of spiritual natures, the drawing of immortal life in that childish soul. They stood there so still, gazing upon her, that even the ticking of the watch seemed too loud. In a few moments, Tom returned with the doctor. He entered, gave one look, and stood silent as the rest. "When did this change take place?" said he, in a low whisper, to Miss Ophelia. "About the turn of the night," was the reply. Mary, roused by the entrance of the doctor, appeared, hurriedly, from the next room. "Augustine, cousin, oh, what?" she hurriedly began. "Hush!" said St. Clair, hoarsely. "He's dying." Mommy heard the words, and flew to awaken the servants. The house was soon roused. Lights were seen, footsteps heard, anxious faces thronged the veranda, and looked tearfully through the glass doors. But St. Clair heard and said nothing. he saw only that look on the face of the little sleeper. "Oh, if she would only wake and speak once more," he said, and, stooping over her, he spoke in her ear, "Eva, darling." The large blue eyes unclosed. A smile passed over her face. She tried to raise her head and to speak. "Do you know me, Eva?" "Dear papa," said the child, with a last effort, throwing her arms about his neck. In a moment they dropped again, and, as St. Clair raised his head, he saw a spasm of mortal agony pass over the face. She struggled for breath and threw up her little hands. "Oh God, this is dreadful," he said, turning away in agony, and wringing Tom's hand, scarce conscious what he was doing. "Oh, Tom, my boy, it is killing me." Tom had his master's hands between his own, and with tears streaming down his dark cheeks, looked up for help where he had always been used to look. "Pray that this may be cut short," said St. Clair. "This wrings my heart." "Oh, bless the Lord, it's over, dear master," said Tom. "Look at her." The child lay panting on her pillows, as one exhausted, a large clear eyes rolled up and fixed. Ah, what said those eyes, that spoke so much of heaven? Earth was past, an earthly pain, but so solemn, so mysterious was the triumphant brightness of that face, that it checked even the sobs of sorrow. They pressed around her in breathless stillness. "Eva," said St. Clair gently. She did not hear. "Oh, Eva, tell us what you see. What is it?" said her father. A bright, a glorious smile passed over her face, and she said brokenly, "Oh, love, joy, peace! Give one sigh, and pass from death unto life. Farewell, beloved child, the bright, eternal doors have closed after thee. We shall see thy sweet face no more. Oh, oh for them who watch thy entrance into heaven, when they shall wake and find only the cold gray sky of daily life, and thou gone forever."